The smoke was thick inside Training Chamber 7. It moved slowly through the air like a gray ghost, carrying the smell of burned metal and melted plastic. Lieutenant Marcus Webb stood at the observation window 3 floors above, his arms crossed over his chest, watching the chaos below. Cadet Emily Park was on her knees in the middle of the arena. Her combat suit was torn in several places. Sparks flew from the damaged joints near her elbows and knees. Her helmet lay on the ground beside her, thrown off in frustration or exhaustion. Her dark hair was wet with sweat and stuck to her forehead and cheeks. Around her, the remains of combat drones lay scattered like broken toys. Some were still smoking. Others had been torn apart so violently that their pieces were spread across 20 feet of floor. But there were too many still standing, 12 of them. Their red optical sensors glowed in the smoke as they surrounded the exhausted cadet. The automated voice of the training system echoed through the chamber. Simulation complete. Cadet Park has failed. Time limit exceeded. All hostages have been eliminated. Marcus shook his head slowly. He had seen many cadets fail this particular test. It was designed to be difficult. The scenario put a single soldier against overwhelming odds with limited ammunition and failing equipment. Most cadets lasted about 4 minutes before the drones took them down. Emily had lasted almost 9 minutes, which was impressive in its own way. But impressive was not the same as passing. He pressed the intercom button on the control panel. Park, report to debriefing room 3 in 10 minutes. We need to discuss your performance. She did not respond. She did not even look up. She just stayed there on her knees, breathing hard, staring at the floor between her hands. Marcus turned away from the window. The other cadets from today's testing group had already finished their trials and left the observation deck. Jason Cole had passed with a score of 72%. Amanda Rivera had scored 68%. Tyler Brooks had barely scraped by with 55%. But passing was passing. Only Emily had failed dot behind Marcus. 3 senior instructors sat at a long table covered with tablets and coffee cups and scattered papers. Commander Nathan Price was the oldest of them, a man with gray hair and deep lines around his eyes from 30 years of military service. Dr. Rachel Kim sat beside him, responsible for psychological evaluation of all cadets. David Stone was the youngest of the 3, a tactical specialist who had written several of the training scenarios himself. Marcus expected to see them making notes, perhaps discussing Emily's failures, maybe preparing the paperwork that would transfer her out of the program and back to regular military service. Instead, he saw something that made no sense. They were not moving. Commander Price had one hand raised in the air, frozen in the middle of a gesture. His mouth was open, caught in the middle of a word he would never finish. His eyes were locked on something across the room, but they did not blink, did not move, did not show any sign of life. Dr. Kim was equally still. Her stylus hovered above her tablet, not touching it, not falling. It just hung there in the air as if gravity had forgotten about it. Her face was calm, peaceful almost, like someone caught in a photograph. David Stone was the strangest sight. He had been drinking his coffee when time stopped for him. The cup was tilted in his hand at an angle that should have sent liquid spilling everywhere. But the coffee was frozen too. It hung in the air like brown glass, a perfect arc of liquid that defied every law of physics Marcus had ever learned. "Commander Price?" Marcus said. His voice sounded strange in the silence. Too loud. Too alone. No response. He stepped closer and waved his hand in front of the commander's face. Nothing. No reaction. No movement. Marcus could see his own reflection in those glassy, empty eyes. Fear began to crawl up his spine like cold fingers. He had seen many strange things in his years of military service. He had been part of missions that were classified so deeply that he could never speak of them. But he had never seen anything like this. This was wrong. This was impossible. He spun around to look back at the observation window. Reaching for his sidearm without even thinking about it, Emily Park was no longer on her knees. She was standing now, in the center of the training chamber, looking directly up at him. The smoke had cleared around her, and the broken drones lay silent at her feet. But something had changed. Something in the way she held herself. Something in the way she stood. She did not look like a failed cadet anymore. She looked like something else entirely. Marcus watched as she began walking toward the exit of the training chamber. Her movements were smooth and confident, nothing like the exhausted stumbling he had seen during the simulation. She moved like a predator, like someone who knew exactly what was happening and was not afraid of it. He kept his hand on his weapon as she climbed the stairs to the observation deck. His heart was beating fast now. His training told him that something was very wrong here. His instincts told him that he should call for backup, should raise an alarm, should do something other than stand here waiting for a failed cadet to walk through that door. But something else told him to wait. Something deeper than training or instinct. Something that wanted to understand what was happening before he made any decisions. The door to the observation deck opened. Emily stepped through it. Up close, Marcus could see details he had missed before. There was something flickering in her eyes. A faint glow, like distant stars reflected in dark water. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. She stopped about 10 feet away from him and looked at the frozen instructors. Her expression was calm, almost sad. "You can see it too," she said. Her voice was different now, older, wiser, full of knowledge that no 22-year-old cadet should possess. "You can see that time has stopped for them." Marcus pulled his sidearm and pointed it at her. "What did you do, Park? What is this?" "I did not do anything, Lieutenant." She turned to look at him, and those strange glowing eyes met his with an intensity that made him want to step backward. "They did this. The ones who have been watching us. The ones who have been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Who are you talking about? What is happening here?" Emily smiled. It was a tired smile, the kind that belonged on someone who had seen too much and carried too many secrets for too long. "I am talking about the war, Lieutenant Webb. The war that is coming. The war that will change everything." She glanced at the frozen instructors again. "And I am talking about why they chose you to hear the truth." Outside the observation window, the lights of the training facility continued to burn. Somewhere in the distance, other cadets were going about their normal routines, unaware that anything strange was happening. But here, in this frozen moment, Marcus Webb was about to learn that the universe was much larger and much more dangerous than he had ever imagined, and nothing would ever be the same again. Marcus kept his weapon pointed at Emily. His hands were steady because he had trained them to be steady. But inside his mind was racing with questions and fears that he could not control. "Start talking," he said. "Tell me what is happening right now. Tell me why these people are frozen. And tell me who you really are." Emily did not seem worried about the gun. She looked at it the way someone might look at a child's toy. Not with disrespect, but with the understanding that it could not hurt her. "My name is Emily Park," she said. "I am 22 years old. I was born in Detroit. I joined the military because I wanted to serve my country. Everything in my file is true." She paused. "But 3 hours ago, something changed. Something found me during the training simulation. Something that has been searching for people like me for a very long time." "Something? What do you mean, something?" "They call themselves the Kethvari." Emily spoke the name carefully, as if it was important to get it exactly right. "They are not from Earth. They are not from our solar system. They come from a place so far away that the light from their home star will not reach Earth for another 10,000 years. Marcus felt his grip on the weapon tighten. Aliens. You are telling me that aliens did this. I am telling you the truth. Whether you believe it or not is your choice. Emily walked slowly toward the observation window and looked down at the training chamber below. The HFY have been watching humanity for almost 100 years. They have studied our wars, our history, our psychology. They have been trying to understand what makes humans different from every other species they have encountered. Different how? Emily turned to face him. The glow in her eyes seemed brighter now, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Every intelligent species the HFY have met follows the same patterns. They fight when the odds are in their favor. They retreat when the odds are against them. They surrender when fighting becomes pointless. This is logical. This is rational. This is what any reasonable creature would do. She walked toward Commander Price's frozen form and studied his face for a moment. Humans are not like that. Humans fight when they should run. Humans charge when they should retreat. Humans sacrifice themselves when survival would be the smart choice. She looked back at Marcus. The HFY have a word for this behavior. In their language, it means the beautiful madness. Marcus lowered his weapon slightly. He did not holster it, but he could feel his defensive posture softening. There was something in Emily's voice that made him want to listen. Something that felt like truth. Why would aliens care about how we fight? He asked. Because they are losing a war. Emily's voice became heavier, darker. For 10,000 years, the HFY have been fighting an enemy called the Void Swarm. This enemy does not negotiate. It does not compromise. It does not stop. It spreads across the galaxy like a disease, consuming everything in its path. She moved to Dr. Kim's tablet and picked it up. The device should have been locked, but Emily's fingers moved across its surface with ease, pulling up images and data that Marcus had never seen before. The Void Swarm adapts to every strategy used against it, Emily continued. If you attack with missiles, it learns to destroy missiles. If you attack with energy weapons, it learns to absorb energy. Every species that has fought the swarm logically has been destroyed. Every fleet that followed rational tactics has been wiped out. The tablet's screen flickered. And suddenly Marcus was looking at something that made his stomach turn. Ships. Massive ships. Bigger than anything humanity had ever built. They were twisted and broken, floating in the darkness of space like the corpses of dead giants. This is what remains of the HFY fleet, Emily said quietly. 70% of their military strength destroyed in the last 50 years. They have maybe 2 generations left before the swarm reaches their core worlds. Marcus stared at the images. He had spent his entire career preparing soldiers for combat. He understood warfare. He understood sacrifice. But this was something beyond his comprehension. This was extinction on a galactic scale. So they came to Earth looking for help, he said slowly. They want us to fight their war for them. Not for them. With them. Emily set the tablet down and faced him directly. The HFY do not want slaves. They do not want servants. They want allies. They want soldiers who can do something that no other species can do. And what is that? Fight without reason. Attack without logic. Refuse to surrender even when surrender is the only rational choice. Emily's eyes seemed to burn brighter as she spoke. The Void Swarm has never encountered a species like humanity. It has never faced soldiers who would rather die than retreat. It has never fought against the beautiful madness. Marcus thought about human history. He thought about soldiers who held impossible positions against overwhelming forces. He thought about pilots who crashed their planes into enemy ships. He thought about the stories his grandfather had told him about men who charged into machine gun fire because surrender was not in their nature. The battle trial, he said suddenly. That is what this was about. You were not being tested to see if you could pass. You were being tested to see if you would break. Emily nodded. The Kethvari designed the scenario to be impossible. No cadet was supposed to pass it. They wanted to see what humans would do when faced with certain defeat. And you charged at them. With nothing but a piece of scrap metal. I did what felt right. I did what every part of my human brain told me to do. Emily smiled, and for a moment she looked like the young cadet Marcus had trained for the past 6 months. I refused to give up, even when giving up was the only logical choice. Marcus holstered his weapon. He did not know why he trusted her. He did not know why he believed any of this. But something deep inside him recognized the truth in her words. Something that had been sleeping his entire life was suddenly wide awake. Why are you telling me this? He asked. Why am I not frozen like the others? Emily's expression changed. The smile faded, replaced by something more serious. More important. Because you were not being tested by the simulation, Lieutenant Webb. I was the simulation. I was the impossible situation. She stepped closer to him. The Kethvari wanted to see how you would react when everything you understood about the world stopped making sense. When your instructors froze. When failed cadets started speaking about aliens and wars and the end of everything. Marcus felt cold. I am the one being evaluated. You have been evaluated since the moment time stopped. Every word you have spoken. Every choice you have made. Every second you did not shoot me. Emily reached out and touched his arm gently. And you passed, Marcus. You listened instead of reacting. You questioned instead of attacking. You opened your mind to possibilities that should have been impossible. What happens now? Emily looked toward the frozen instructors, then back at Marcus. The glow in her eyes was fading slowly, but her expression remained intense. Now you have a choice to make. The most important choice of your life. She took a deep breath. The Kethvari are offering humanity a place in this war. Not as slaves. Not as cannon fodder. As true allies with full access to technology that will make our species a power in the galaxy. And if I say no, then time resumes. Everyone wakes up. You forget this conversation ever happened, and life continues as normal. Emily paused. But the war will still come, Marcus. The void swarm will still spread. And eventually, it will reach Earth. The only question is whether humanity will be ready to fight when that day comes. Marcus looked at the frozen people around him. He looked at the tablet with its images of destroyed fleets and dying civilizations. He looked at Emily, this young woman who had become something more than human in the span of a few hours. And he made his choice. Show me everything, he said. Emily smiled. And the walls of the observation deck began to dissolve around them, revealing the stars that had been waiting beyond. The walls melted away like ice in summer heat. One moment, Marcus was standing in the observation deck of a military training facility. The next moment, he was floating in space. He gasped and reached for something to hold on to, but there was nothing. He was surrounded by darkness and stars and the cold emptiness of the void. His lungs burned with the need for air, but somehow he could still breathe. His skin should have frozen in seconds, but somehow he felt nothing but a gentle warmth. Do not be afraid, Emily said. She floated beside him, calm and peaceful, as if standing in the middle of space was the most normal thing in the world. This is not real. The Kethvari are showing us a projection, a memory of what they have seen. Marcus forced himself to breathe slowly. In, out, in, out. He had been trained to stay calm in dangerous situations. He had faced enemy fire without flinching. But this was something else entirely. Where are we? He asked. About 40,000 light years from Earth. This is the HFY home sector. Emily pointed toward a cluster of stars that seemed brighter than the others. That is where their civilization began. 12 billion years ago, before Earth even existed, the HFY were already building cities among those stars. Marcus looked around slowly, letting his eyes adjust to the darkness. And as they adjusted, he began to see things that had been invisible before. Ships. Hundreds of ships. Thousands of ships. They filled the space around him like a cloud of metal insects. Some were small and fast, darting between the larger vessels. Others were massive beyond belief, bigger than cities, bigger than mountains, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a planet. This was the HFY fleet, Emily said quietly. 200 years ago, before the Void Swarm found them, was? Emily did not answer. She simply pointed toward the edge of the projection. Something was moving there. Something dark. It was hard to see at first because it seemed to absorb the light around it. But as Marcus watched, he began to understand what he was looking at. It was a wave. A wall of darkness that stretched across the stars like a curtain being drawn across a window. And within that darkness, things were moving. Shapes that twisted and writhed and pulsed with a hunger that Marcus could feel even from this distance. "The Void Swarm," he whispered. "Yes." Emily's voice was heavy with sadness. "They came from somewhere beyond our galaxy. The HFY do not know where. They do not know why. They only know that the swarm consumes everything it touches. Planets, stars, entire civilizations. Nothing survives." The projection shifted, and suddenly Marcus was in the middle of a battle. Ships exploded around him in silent bursts of light. Weapons fired beams of energy that cut through metal like paper. And everywhere, the dark shapes of the swarm moved through the wreckage, consuming what remained. Marcus watched as a HFY battleship, larger than anything humans had ever built, was surrounded by swarm creatures. The ship fired everything it had. Missiles, lasers, weapons that Marcus could not even name. Each attack killed thousands of the dark creatures, but more came. Always more. They crawled over the ship's hull like ants over a piece of fruit. They tore through the armor with claws and teeth and appendages that should not have existed. And within minutes, the mighty battleship was silent, dark, dead. "How do you fight something like that?" Marcus asked. His voice sounded small and lost in the vastness of space. "The HFY tried everything." Emily floated closer to him. "They developed new weapons, new strategies, new technologies. For 200 years, they threw their greatest minds at this problem. And every time they found a solution, the swarm adapted." "Adapted how?" "The swarm learned from every battle. It studies every tactic used against it. If you attack with heat, it develops resistance to heat. If you attack with cold, it develops resistance to cold. If you use a clever strategy, it learns that strategy and counters it." Emily paused. "Within 3 battles, any weapon becomes useless. Within 5 battles, any tactic becomes a trap." Marcus thought about this. He thought about every military training exercise he had ever run. Every scenario was based on logic. Attack enemy weak points. Defend your own strong points. Retreat when necessary. Advance when possible. Everything he had ever learned was built on the foundation of rational thinking. "They need something that is not logical," he said slowly. "Something that does not follow patterns. Exactly." Emily smiled. "The HFY have studied 47 intelligent species. Every single one thinks the same way. They all follow the same rules of warfare. Attack when strong. Retreat when weak. Surrender when defeated. But humans are different. Humans are impossible." Emily laughed, and it was a sound full of wonder and disbelief. The HFY spent decades trying to understand human behavior. They built computer models. They ran simulations. They analyzed thousands of years of human history. And they still cannot predict what a human will do in combat. The projection shifted again. This time, Marcus was looking at Earth. His home planet hung in the darkness like a blue and green jewel. Beautiful and fragile, and utterly unaware of the horrors lurking in the cosmos. Human soldiers hold positions they should abandon, Emily said. They attack enemies they should avoid. They sacrifice themselves to save strangers. They fight with broken weapons and empty magazines. They charge at tanks with nothing but grenades strapped to their chests. Images flickered through the projection. Soldiers from different eras, different wars, different countries. But they all shared something in common. They all showed humans doing things that made no logical sense. A man standing in front of a tank with nothing but a shopping bag. Pilots diving their planes into enemy ships. Soldiers dragging wounded friends through gunfire when leaving them would have been safer. Medics running into explosions to save lives. Parents fighting to the death to protect children. The HFY have a phrase for this, Emily said. In their language, it roughly translates to the ones who do not know when to stop. They've been searching for species like this for 10,000 years. And they found us. They found you. Marcus. Emily turned to face him. Not all humans have this quality. Not all humans can tap into the beautiful madness. But some can. Some carry it in their blood, like a fire waiting to be lit. How do they know I have it? Emily gestured, and the projection showed the observation deck again. Marcus watched himself standing at the window, watching the failed simulation. He watched himself notice the frozen instructors. He watched himself draw his weapon and point it at Emily. But then something changed. Instead of shooting, he lowered the weapon. Instead of attacking, he listened. Instead of following his training, he did something completely unexpected. He opened his mind. Any other species would have reacted with violence, Emily explained. Fear leads to aggression. Aggression leads to action. It is the logical response to an impossible situation. But you did not follow that pattern. You chose curiosity over fear. You chose understanding over violence. That does not sound like the beautiful madness you were describing. It is a different kind of madness. Emily smiled. The madness of a leader. The madness of someone who can see beyond the immediate danger to the bigger picture. The HFY do not just need soldiers who will charge into death. They need officers who will know when to order that charge and when to find another way. Marcus looked at the projection of himself. He looked at the frozen instructors. He looked at the young cadet who had somehow become the vessel for an alien message. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "We want you to help us build something new," Emily said. A force that combines HFY technology with human unpredictability. A military that can surprise the Void Swarm. An army that does not follow the rules. She extended her hand toward him. In her palm, something glowed with a soft blue light. It looked like a crystal, but it moved like water, constantly shifting and changing shape. This is a connection point. If you accept it, you will be linked to the HFY network. You will have access to their knowledge, their technology, their resources. Emily paused. And you will carry responsibility that no human has ever carried before. The responsibility of leading humanity into an alien war. The responsibility of giving humanity a chance to survive. Emily's eyes met his. The Void Swarm will reach Earth eventually, with or without HFY help. The only question is whether humans will be ready when that day comes. Marcus looked at the glowing crystal. He thought about his life, his career, everything he had worked for and everything he had believed in. Then he thought about Earth, about the billions of people living their lives, unaware of the darkness spreading among the stars, about children who deserved a future, about a species that had survived ice ages and plagues and wars and disasters, a species that did not know when to quit. He reached out and took the crystal from Emily's hand, and the universe opened before him like a door that had always been waiting to be found. The crystal dissolved into Marcus's hand like water soaking into sand. For a moment, he felt nothing. Then the knowledge came. It was not like learning. It was not like remembering. It was like suddenly realizing you had always known something but had forgotten to notice it. Information flooded into his mind in waves. Star maps, ship designs, weapon systems, battle histories. 10,000 years of war compressed into a single overwhelming moment. Marcus fell to his knees in the void of space. His hands pressed against nothing, but somehow he did not fall. Around him, the projection of the universe spun and shifted and changed, showing him things that human eyes had never seen. He saw the Kethvari homeworld, a planet covered in cities that reached into the clouds. Billions of beings going about their lives, raising children, building futures, dreaming of tomorrow. He saw their history stretching back to a time before Earth-Sun had even formed. He saw the first contact with the Void Swarm, a research station on the edge of explored space, sending a distress signal that was cut off mid-transmission. The investigation fleet that found nothing but floating debris and silence. The growing realization that something terrible had awakened in the darkness between galaxies. He saw the wars. Thousands of battles across thousands of years. Victory followed by defeat. Hope followed by despair. Species after species trying to stop the swarm and failing. The Kethvari watching their allies fall one by one until they stood alone against the endless hunger. And he saw humanity. Through Kethvari eyes, Marcus watched human history unfold. He saw tribes fighting over scraps of land. He saw empires rising and falling. He saw wars that killed millions and peace that lasted generations. But most of all, he saw the thing that made humans unique. He saw soldiers walking into certain death with smiles on their faces. He saw mothers lifting cars to save trapped children. He saw firefighters running into burning buildings while everyone else ran out. He saw doctors working through plagues that killed their colleagues. He saw ordinary people doing extraordinary things because they simply could not accept defeat. The Kethvari had a name for this quality. In their language, it was a word that could not be translated exactly. The closest human equivalent was something like, the fire that burns when all fuel is gone. Marcus understood now. He understood why they had chosen Earth, why they had chosen humans, why they had chosen him. The projection faded slowly, and Marcus found himself back in the observation deck. The frozen instructors still sat at their table. The suspended coffee still hung in the air. Time had not moved at all during his journey through Kethvari memory, but Marcus had changed. He could feel it in his bones. He could see it when he looked at his hands. There was something different about him now, something that had not been there before. "The connection is complete," Emily said. She was standing beside him, looking tired but satisfied. "You are now linked to the Kethvari network. You can access their knowledge whenever you need it. You can communicate with their leaders across the stars." Marcus stood slowly. His legs felt weak, but his mind had never been clearer. What happens now? Now comes the hard part. Emily walked toward the observation window and looked down at the empty training chamber. The Kethvari do not want to invade Earth. They do not want to take control of human governments. They want partners, not puppets. So they need us to volunteer. They need humanity to choose. And that means someone has to explain the truth to the people in charge. Someone has to convince them that aliens exist, that a war is coming, that everything they believe about the universe is wrong. Emily turned to face him. That someone is you, Marcus. Marcus laughed. It was a hollow sound that echoed in the frozen room. You want me to walk into the Pentagon and tell them that aliens are real? They will put me in a mental hospital. Perhaps. Or perhaps they will listen. Emily smiled. Humans are unpredictable, remember. That is the whole point. Marcus thought about this. He thought about the generals and politicians who would have to approve any alliance with an alien species. He thought about the religious leaders who would have to accept that humanity was not alone in the universe. He thought about the billions of ordinary people who would have to face the terrifying truth that something hungry was spreading among the stars. It will take years, he said. Decades, maybe, just to prepare people for the idea. The Kethvari have time. Not much, but enough. Emily moved toward the frozen form of Commander Price. They have been preparing for this moment for almost a century. They have contacts in human governments, scientists who have been working on adapted technology, military officers who have been briefed on partial truths. You are saying there are already people who know? A few. Very few. But they have been laying groundwork for exactly this moment. Emily touched the commander's frozen shoulder gently. Nathan Price is one of them. Marcus stared at his commanding officer. The man he had served under for 3 years. The man who had trained him, evaluated him, promoted him. He knows about the Kethvari. He knows enough. He was recruited 20 years ago after a similar experience. Emily smiled. The Kethvari are very patient. They have been building a network of human allies one person at a time, waiting for the moment when enough people would be ready to hear the truth. And that moment is now? That moment is soon. Maybe not today. Maybe not this year. But the time is coming when humanity will have to choose. Emily stepped back from the commander. The Kethvari wanted to give you this knowledge before that moment arrives. They wanted you to have time to prepare, to think, to decide how you want to help. Marcus looked around the frozen room. He looked at the instructors who had evaluated countless cadets. He looked at the equipment that had been used to train soldiers for human wars. He looked at everything he had known and understood about his purpose in life. And he realized that all of it was about to change. Why me? He asked quietly. Out of all the humans on Earth, why did they choose me? Emily's expression softened. Because of what you did when time stopped. Because you did not panic or attack or try to run. You asked questions. You listened to impossible answers. You opened your mind to something beyond your understanding. She moved closer to him. The Kethvari have learned that the humans who make the best soldiers are not always the ones who fight hardest. Sometimes the best soldiers are the ones who know when to put down their weapons and think. The ones who can see past the immediate battle to the larger war. Leaders. Yes, leaders. Teachers. The ones who will train the next generation of human warriors. Emily paused. The Kethvari do not just need soldiers, Marcus. They need people who can show other humans how to use the beautiful madness, how to channel it, how to aim it at the right targets. Marcus thought about his years as an instructor, all the cadets he had trained, all the lessons he had taught about tactics and strategy and survival. He had always believed he was preparing soldiers for human conflicts, small wars, limited battles, conflicts that ended with treaties and borders and handshakes. Now he understood that he had been preparing for something much bigger. When time resumes, he said, what should I do? Continue your work. Train your cadets. Watch for the ones who carry the fire. Emily began walking toward the door. The Kethvari will contact you when the time is right. Until then, live your life. Do your job. But remember what you have learned today. And what about you? Emily stopped at the door. She looked back at him with those strange glowing eyes that were slowly returning to normal. I will continue my training. I will become the soldier the HFY need me to be. And someday, when the war reaches Earth, I will fight alongside you. She smiled one last time. It was the smile of a young woman with a heavy burden and a clear purpose. Goodbye, Lieutenant Webb. Thank you for listening. She stepped through the door, and time began to move again. The world came back to life with a sound like breaking glass. Commander Nathan Price finished his sentence. And that concludes today's evaluations. He looked down at his tablet and frowned slightly, as if he had lost his place in a thought. Dr. Rachel Kim's stylus touched her tablet and began moving across the screen. She was making notes about the cadets, completely unaware that she had been frozen in time for what felt like hours. David. Stone cursed as hot coffee spilled across his uniform. Damn it, he muttered, grabbing napkins from the table. I swear this cup has a mind of its own. Marcus stood perfectly still. His heart was pounding. His hands were shaking slightly. Every part of his body wanted to scream about what had just happened. But his mind remained calm, focused, clear, because he remembered everything. The knowledge the HFY had given him was still there, tucked away in corners of his mind that had not existed before. Star maps, technology, history, all of it waiting for him like books on a shelf, ready to be opened whenever he needed them. Lieutenant Webb? Commander Price was looking at him with concern. Are you all right? You look pale. Marcus took a deep breath. He forced his hands to stop shaking. He made himself smile. I am fine, sir. Just thinking about Cadet Park's performance. Price snorted and shook his head. Not much to think about there. She failed completely. Ignored every tactical protocol we taught her. Charged at the enemy with nothing but a piece of scrap metal. He turned to Dr. Kim. We will process her transfer papers by the end of the week. Actually, sir, Marcus heard himself saying, I would like to recommend her for the advanced program. The room went silent. Dr. Kim looked up from her tablet. Stone stopped dabbing at his uniform. Commander Price stared at Marcus as if he had just spoken in a foreign language. The advanced program? Price repeated slowly. Webb. She scored in the bottom 5% of her class. She failed the most basic combat evaluation we have. Yes, sir. She did. And you want to put her in advanced training? Marcus thought about everything he had seen. The void swarm spreading across the galaxy. The HFY fighting a losing war for 10,000 years. The desperate need for soldiers who could do the impossible. Sir, he said carefully, I believe Cadet Park showed something today that we do not usually test for. Something that might be more valuable than any tactical score. And what would that be? The refusal to quit. Marcus met the commander's eyes. He saw something there. A flicker of recognition. A hint of understanding that went deeper than the words being spoken. She was surrounded by 12 enemies. She had no ammunition, no backup, no chance of survival. And instead of surrendering, she attacked. She got herself killed, Price pointed out. In the simulation, yes. But in a real combat situation, against a real enemy, that kind of spirit can change everything. Marcus paused. We train our soldiers to follow protocols, to retreat when necessary, to make logical decisions under pressure. But sometimes the logical decision is not the right decision. Price was quiet for a long moment. He seemed to be thinking about something far away, something that only he could see. Dr. Kim, he said finally, pull Cadet Park's file. I want a full psychological workup. Genetic screening. Everything we have on her. Kim nodded and began typing on her tablet. And while you are at it, Price continued, his eyes still locked on Marcus, pull Lieutenant Webb's file as well. Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. Sir, You have been working in this facility for 3 years, Webb. You have trained hundreds of cadets. You have never once recommended a failed candidate for the advanced program. Price leaned back in his chair. Something changed today. I want to understand what. For a moment, Marcus thought he saw something in the commander's eyes. A glow, a flicker. Something that reminded him of Emily Park standing in the frozen observation deck, speaking impossible truths about aliens and wars and the fate of humanity. Then it was gone, and Price was just an ordinary commander again. "Yes, sir," Marcus said. "I understand." The door to the observation deck opened, and Emily walked in. She was still wearing her torn combat suit. Her hair was still wet with sweat. She looked exactly like what she was supposed to be, a failed cadet reporting for her debriefing. But when her eyes met Marcus's, he saw the truth. She remembered, too. "Cadet Park," Price said, "Lieutenant Webb has made an unusual request on your behalf. He believes you should be transferred to the advanced program instead of being removed from service." Emily's expression showed nothing. She was a perfect actress, playing the role of a confused and surprised young soldier. "Sir, I do not understand. I failed the trial. You did. Spectacularly." Price stood and walked toward her. He was tall enough to look down at the young woman, but there was something in his posture that suggested respect rather than authority. "But Webb seems to think that your failure showed something valuable. Something we might need." Emily glanced at Marcus. He gave her the smallest nod possible. "I just did not want to give up, sir," she said quietly. "I know it was not the smart thing to do. I know I should have surrendered. But I could not make myself do it." Price studied her face for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled. "Cadet Park, there is something I am going to tell you. Something that very few people know." He placed his hand on her shoulder. "Sometimes the smart thing and the right thing are not the same. Sometimes the soldiers who win wars are the ones who do not know when to quit." Emily's eyes widened slightly. It was the only sign that she understood what was happening. "I am going to approve Lieutenant Webb's recommendation," Price continued. "You will report to Advanced Training Facility 7 tomorrow morning. Your new instructor will explain what that means." "Thank you, sir." Price nodded and turned back to the table. "Dr. Kim, Stone, we are done here. I want those files on my desk by tomorrow." The two officers gathered their things and left the observation deck. Price followed them, pausing at the door to look back at Marcus and Emily. "Webb," he said, "walk with me. There are some things we need to discuss." Marcus looked at Emily one last time. She smiled at him. It was a small smile, barely visible, but it carried the weight of everything they had shared. "Good luck, cadet," he said. "Thank you, Lieutenant. I think we are all going to need it." Marcus followed Commander Price out of the observation deck and into the corridor beyond. Behind him, Emily Park stood at the window, looking down at the empty training chamber where her life had changed forever. Outside, the sun was setting over the military base. Cars drove on distant highways. Planes crossed the sky on their way to ordinary destinations. Somewhere, children were playing and families were eating dinner, and people were falling in love and growing old and living their small, precious human lives. They did not know what was coming. They did not know about the war spreading among the stars. They did not know that their species had been chosen to fight the greatest battle in galactic history, but they would learn. Soon enough, they would all learn. And when that day came, Marcus Webb would be ready. Emily Park would be ready. The network of human allies that the Kethvari had spent a century building would be ready, because humans did not know when to quit. And that was exactly what the universe needed. Marcus walked beside his commander through the corridors of the base. They did not speak. They did not need to. Both of them knew that a new chapter was beginning, a chapter that would be written in the light of distant stars and the fire of impossible battles. The war for the galaxy was coming, and humanity was going to fight, not because they had to, not because they were forced, but because that was who they were, the ones who did not know when to stop. The beautiful madness. The fire that burns. When all fuel is gone. Human beings, and somewhere, in the darkness between stars, the void swarm continued to spread. It had consumed 47 species. It had destroyed civilizations that had existed for millions of years. It had never been stopped, never been defeated, never faced anything it could not overcome. But it had never faced humans before, and that was going to make all the difference.